ma'am, and welcome to my Southern Rustic kitchen. This is where I make tasty meals for those I love. This week I'm whipping up some Israeli dishes, so come join me in the kitchen and let's make some delicious meals. Hey guys, this week I'm starting out with dessert. I am making MALABI. It is a traditional Israeli dessert. It's absolutely delicious and it's so easy to make. Now I'm starting with dessert this week because I want to have it for desserts through the entire week this week. So what I've got going on here is I've got some milk. You can do whatever kind of milk that you like. You can do almond milk, coconut milk, regular milk, low-fat milk. They will all work just fine in this. I've got some sugar, cornstarch, and some rose water. Now, if you can't find rose water, you can certainly order this online. I will leave the link to the brand that I use down in the description box below. But you can always substitute this with vanilla or any other kind of flavoring that you prefer. For the fruit sauce that goes on the top, it's so easy to make. I've got some coconut here. This is what I'm going to be using after it sets. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit on the top for decoration. I've got some strawberry jam here. This is just my go-to easy strawberry jam, but you can use whatever kind of jam that you want as long as it's seedless. If it's not seedless, heat it up on the stove until it gets liquidy and just pour it through a strainer and you will be good to go. I've got some water, rose water. Again, you can substitute this with any kind of flavoring that you want. And I've got some sugar. So I'm going to get you guys set up and we will get this dessert going. Okay guys, so what I did is I poured 2 cups of my milk into a saucepan to the other 2 cups of milk in my little measuring cup here. All I did was added the cornstarch and the rose water, and I just mixed it up. To the 2 cups of the milk on the stove in a saucepan, you're going to go ahead and add in your sugar. You can use any kind of sugar that you like, have on hand, will work. So I'm going to get my heat on, about medium low. And I'm just going to stir this until the sugar dissolves. It should be about 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, it has been about 3.5 minutes and my sugar has dissolved, and I turned my heat down to low. Now all I'm going to do is give my little cornstarch and milk mixture here a little whisk and add it to my hot milk mixture. We're going to let this cook until it's nice and thickened. Should take about 5 to 7 minutes. And then I'm going to set my little cup here to the side because I'm going to pour this back into my measuring cup, and it's just going to help me pour it into my little glass cups. So I'm going to go ahead and let this thicken up, pour it back into my cup, and then I'll meet you here and we'll get it in the cups. Alright, my mixture is nice and thick. It coats the back of a spoon, so all I'm going to do now is pour this into my little cups here as evenly as I possibly can. And then we're going to cover these with plastic wrap. Make sure that the plastic wrap touches the top of the pudding, so that way it doesn't form a skin. And then we're going to let these chill for about 3 to 4 hours, just until they're set. And in the meantime, we are going to make our fruit sauce to go on the top. Alright, so the pudding mixture is in the refrigerator. It's chilling, it's thickening up. So we're gonna go ahead and make our fruit sauce to go on the top. So I've got my water here, and I'm just gonna add everything to a little saucepan. I've got my jam, and that will go right in there. Get all of that out. Now this is just my homemade strawberry jam. It's just strawberries, sugar, lemon juice, a little bit of water, and it's just boiled on the stove. I added a little bit of salt, and I just boiled it until it thickened up. And that is pretty much my strawberry jam. So I've got that in there, I've got the water. I'm going to go ahead and add in my sugar. And I'm going to give this a little mix. I'm going to cut my heat on about medium-low. And I'm just going to cook this until the sugar dissolves and it gets slightly thickened, because it will set up in the refrigerator when we chill it again. Now you can use any kind of fruit that you want. I've had this so many different ways. They are all absolutely delicious. I've had blackberry, I've had pistachio, I've had coconut, blueberry. You can make this however you want. Use any kind of fruit that you want. If you don't want to use fruit, just make the milk pudding. Add some toppings on top like fresh fruit. You can chop up some fresh fruit and kind of add a little bit of sugar to it to kind of macerate it, and top it on the top, and that is absolutely delicious as well. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up and kind of let this cool down, and when the pudding is completely thickened, we will add this to the top. Okay, so this has been cooking for about 5 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off the heat, and I'm going to add in my rose water. You can do any kind of flavoring that you want. You can do almond, you can do orange blossom water, whatever you like. So I'm going to go ahead and add this, and the reason why I'm adding this while the heat is off is because I don't want the flavor to evaporate. I'm going to mix this in, and I'm going to set it on the back burner here, and I'm going to let it cool off. And when the pudding mixture gets nice and completely chilled, we will add this to the top, and it's going to be absolutely delicious. And we'll top that when it gets nice and chilled and set with some of this coconut, and it's going to be absolutely delicious. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, let this cool, and then I'll meet you back here and we will put this together. And I went ahead and set out all of my ingredients for my shakshuka that I'm going to be making for dinner. So I will meet you back here in just a few. Alright, so I've got my MALABI here, and these are not completely set yet. They still got about an hour or so to chill, but they are thick enough to where I can add my fruit topping on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add this to the top in a thin little layer to all of these, and kind of swirl it around evenly to coat the top. And then I'm going to put a lid on it and pop these back in the refrigerator and let these finish setting up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what they look like before I put them in the refrigerator. Okay, here is what the MALABI looked like. I just topped it with that fruit topping and then added a little bit of shredded coconut on top. So now I'm just going to attach the lid, put these back in the refrigerator for a couple of hours or until after dinner when they are nice and set, and these will be ready for dessert. Alright, now it's time for dinner. I'm making shakshuka. It's super easy, so flavorful and delicious. I'm going to be serving it with some fresh homemade pita bread. You can use store-bought or make your own, whichever you prefer. But this is typically served as breakfast, but I'm going to be making it for dinner. So what I've got going on here is I've got some diced tomatoes with their juice, olive oil, salt and pepper, and an onion. Now I'm not going to be using all of this onion. This is 2 onions that I've chopped up because I'm going to need some for tomorrow's dinner. So I'm just going to use half of this. I've got some feta cheese. I've got some eggs, garlic, some sugar, tomato paste, and for seasoning I've got cumin, coriander, smoked paprika, and some red pepper flakes. So I'm going to get you guys set up and we will get dinner going. So I've got my skillet here coming up to temp on medium-low heat, and I've just added a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to add about half of these onions right to my pan, as well as a little bit of salt. There we go. And some pepper. And I'm going to let these cook for about 5 minutes or so until they get nice and soft. I don't want them to brown, so keep your temperature low. I'm going to let these cook until they're soft, and then we will add everything else. Okay, so these have been cooking for about 5 minutes. They're nice and soft. I'm going to go ahead and add in my garlic, and I'm going to let this cook for about 30 seconds or so, just until I smell that lovely garlic smell. It shouldn't take too long. Okay, now that I'm starting to smell that, I am going to go ahead and add in all of my spices. My cumin, my smoked paprika, red pepper flakes, and my ground coriander. And I'm going to let this cook for about another 30 seconds to a minute, just to toast up those flavors in the spices. Just wake them up a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to add in all of my tomato paste and get that toasting up as well, and combined with all of those spices. Okay, now I can smell those spices, and it smells absolutely delicious. If you could smell my kitchen right now, it smells heavenly. So I'm going to go ahead and add all of my tomatoes. Cut my heat down just a little bit. And get that all nice and combined. Okay, set this can to the side. I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle in my sugar right in there and mix this up and make sure that sugar gets nice and melted down. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more salt and pepper. Just a tiny bit, because you can always add more salt later. Now typically this dish is a kind of a spicy dish. We love spice, so you can add in as much or as little spice as you want. You can add hot sauce to this, you can add harissa paste to this and make it a little bit more spicy. But we're going to leave the spices as is, but add as much or as little spice as you want. Now we're just going to bring this up to a simmer, and we're going to cook this for about 10 minutes until it gets nice and slightly thickened. In the meantime, I'm going to kind of clean up a little bit and get ready to add in the eggs. So I'm going to do that, clean up, and meet you right back here. Okay, so this has been cooking for about 10 minutes and it's thickened up very nicely. I don't want it to be too thick because it's going to continue to cook when I add the eggs. So all I'm going to do is make a little bit of a well into my mixture here, and I am going to just crack open an egg. I'm going to do it in this little bowl here just in case I get a bad egg. I don't want to add it to my SHAKSHUKA. So I'm just going to add that in there and continue to do this until I get all of the eggs added in. And then I will meet you back here and I will show you what to do next. Okay, so I've got all of my eggs in there, and all I'm going to do now is season the eggs. You want to season the eggs because you want to have them just as flavorful as the rest of the dish. So I'm going to add some salt and some pepper right to the top of the eggs. And you can cover this up with a lid. You can put this in the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes or however long you want your eggs to cook. I'm going to cook mine on the stove. I'm going to turn it down to low. I'm going to add a lid and I'm going to cook this for about 7 to 10 minutes. And yeah, just cook it until the eggs are done to your liking. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up and I will show you what it looks like when it gets done and when we add in the feta. Okay, so this has been cooking for about 10 minutes. I cooked it for 5 minutes with the lid on, and I took the lid off. I added a little bit of dried parsley flakes to the top, and I just let it cook for a couple of minutes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some za'atar to the top of this. Now za'atar is a spice blend. It's got sumac, sesame seeds, salt. It's just a very nice blend of spices. It's Middle Eastern spice. I'm going to add a little bit of this to the top. And if you can't find this at your local grocery store, I will leave a link to this in the description box below so you can check that out. And I've got some feta here. Now if you have any fresh herbs and spices like cilantro or parsley, you can add it to the top now. But I'm going to go ahead and crumble up this feta and add this all up onto these eggs, and it's going to be absolutely delicious, and it's going to finish up cooking, and that cheese is going to get nice and soft. Now you don't want to add too much of this feta to the top. You want it to be a nice balance. So I'm going to give my hands a rinse and we will add on some olive oil. Okay, so I've cut my heat off and I've got some olive oil here. This is just some organic extra virgin olive oil. I use this brand here. This is the Partana brand. I typically use this to finish a dish, but you can add whatever kind of olive oil that you have on hand. So I've got that on there, and I'm just going to let this sit and kind of finish cooking the eggs. This is in a cast iron pan, so it's going to hold the heat nicely. But if you have a non-stick pan, you can just put this on low heat for another 2 to 3 minutes and it will be just fine. So I'm going to let that go and I'm going to clean up and we will plate this up for dinner. Here is my plate. I just have the shakshuka here with a simple side salad. It's just seasoned with olive oil, salt and pepper, a little bit of feta cheese, and I have some pita on the side. This was absolutely delicious. If you've not tried shakshuka, I highly, highly recommend it. Okay, I've got my chicken here, and for easy cleanup and easy marinating, I'm going to leave it in a plastic bag. You can certainly use a bowl with a lid. I'm going to go ahead and add in my olive oil. You don't need much. About 1 to 2 tablespoons will work just fine. I'm going to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. I'm going to add in all of my spice mixture here and the juice of half of a lemon. And I'm going to get as much air out of this bag as I possibly can. And then I'm just going to massage all of these spices into the chicken. I'm going to leave it on this little plate and pop it in the fridge for about 45 minutes to an hour. And just let it marinate and hang out. Okay, now we're just going to make our tahini sauce. I've got my tahini here. I'm going to add the juice of half of a lemon. I'm going to add my water. a little bit of salt, and a little bit of pepper. Now I'm mixing it into this little cup here so that way I can put it in a little bottle so I can spread it over what I'm topping it with very easily. And now I'm just going to mix this up, taste for seasoning. Now if this is not as thin as you want, or if it's too thick, you can add a little bit more water. But tahini, it kind of soaks up a lot of water, a lot of liquid. So if you don't add enough, it will get too thick. So that is nice and combined. And all I'm going to do is just pour it in my little bottle here, pop it in the fridge, and that will be ready. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll work on the salad. Okay, so I've got all of my ingredients set here for my Israeli salad. It's very, very simple. I've got some tomatoes, cucumber, and some onion. Now, this is just the base ingredients. You can pretty much add whatever you want from here. So I've got that in there, and you're going to need the juice of a lemon, but you're also going to need the zest of a lemon. So I'm going to go ahead and zest the lemon first before I juice it, because it's very, very hard to zest a juiced lemon. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and get that in there. Okay, got that in there. I'm going to go ahead and juice the lemon in there. Okay, now I've got my parsley and my dill. I'm going to go ahead and add that in there. Now if you've got fresh, I recommend using fresh, but my local Walmart, local grocery store did not have any, so we're using dried, but that's fine. It'll work just fine. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper and a couple of tablespoons of olive oil, and mix this up until it's nice and combined. I love the smell of dill, especially in salads. Alright, that is nice and combined. All I'm going to do now is just put some plastic wrap on the top of this and pop it in the fridge. And this is going to sit in the fridge until dinner is ready. Alright, so I took the chicken out of the refrigerator and just placed it on the sheet tray that's lined with parchment. I'm going to bake this at 400 degrees for about 15 to 20 minutes. Make sure that you let your chicken come to room temperature before you put it in the oven, or it'll seize up and dry out, and we don't want that. We want nice juicy chicken. So 400 degrees, 15 to 20 minutes, just until it's completely cooked through. Then we're going to remove it and let it hang out and kind of cool off a little bit, and then we will move on to the next step. Alright, so I've got a skillet here, and it's over medium-low heat, and I've got some olive oil. I'm going to put about a tablespoon or two of olive oil in my pan, as well as a whole onion, just diced. This is about 1.5 onions, so I'm just going to use 3/4 of this. And I'm going to add a little bit of pepper, and I'm going to add just a tiny bit of salt, just to help sweat those onions down and help them get tender. And I'm going to cook these until they are slightly tender and cooked through. And then we're going to add in our chicken. Now, after I let the chicken cool, I just sliced it into thin slices, but you can dice it up into cubes if that's what you want to do. It's really your preference. So I'm going to go ahead and cook these onions down and add the chicken and cook it until the chicken is nice and golden brown. And I will show you what that looks like when it's all done. Okay, so these have been cooking for about 7 minutes. And it's got some nice brown bits on there, some nice charred pieces. So I'm just going to cut the heat off, and I'm just going to add these right back to my little bowl here. And we're just going to set these aside. And I will make my plate. And I'll show you my plate. Alright, here is the setup. I've got my Israeli salad here. Now I went ahead and added a little bit of feta cheese to this and just mixed it around and checked the seasoning to make sure it was delicious. I've got my pita here. I've just cut them in half. They're ready to go. I've also got the tahini sauce here, my chicken mixture, and I made some potatoes to go along with it. This is just regular potatoes. They're seasoned with olive oil, salt, pepper, some paprika, and some za'atar seasoning. And I just mixed it around, put it on a sheet tray lined with parchment, and I baked them at 425 degrees for about 40 to 45 minutes, just until they were nice and golden brown. And I kind of went in and tossed them around every 15 minutes so that way they were nice and golden on each side. So that is what we're having. I'm going to go ahead and make my plate. Alright guys, so here is my plate. I've just got the pita bread and added a little bit of the meat mixture at the bottom, and then I filled it up with some of the Israeli salad, topped it off with some tahini dressing, and I added some potatoes on the side. So this smells so good and I cannot wait to dig in. So this is what we're having for dinner tonight. For dinner tonight, I'm going to be making a meatball and tomato sauce. It's super easy and very delicious. Very few ingredients. This is what I've got going on. For the sauce portion of the dish, you're going to need some olive oil, salt and pepper, red wine. If you don't want to use red wine, feel free to substitute that with a little bit of beef broth or chicken broth. I've got some onion that I've just got diced up, some crushed tomatoes, garlic, and for seasoning I've got some basil, oregano, red pepper flakes, and some sugar. For the meat portion of like the meatballs, you're going to need some breadcrumbs. Any kind of breadcrumbs will work just fine. An egg. I've got 3 tablespoons of the crushed tomatoes reserved over here for the meatballs. I've got a pound of ground beef. You can also do ground chicken or ground turkey. And for seasoning, I've got some parsley and sumac. Now, if you can't find sumac at your local grocery store, I will leave a link in the description box down below so you can check out this Middle Eastern seasoning. It's absolutely delicious and it adds such a wonderful flavor to any dish. So I'm going to get you guys set up and we will get this started. Okay, so I've added my ground beef to a bowl along with my breadcrumbs. You can use any kind of breadcrumbs that you like or prefer. I'm going to add just a little bit of salt and some pepper. Now season this to taste. If you like a lot of salt, add a lot. If you don't want to add too much, just add a little bit. So I've got the pepper in. I'm going to go ahead and add in my sumac and my parsley, as well as my tomatoes, my crushed tomatoes, and my egg. And I'm just going to mix this up and set it aside because we're going to go ahead and start on our sauce. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll move on to making the sauce. Okay, so I've got my meatballs here. I let them rest for about 30 minutes and then just roll them into balls. You don't have to let them rest. You can just go ahead and roll them into balls and then set them aside, whichever is easier for you. So I'm going to go ahead and set these aside and we will move on over to the stove. Okay, so I've got my large brazier pot here. You're going to need a pot or a skillet that has a lid. You're going to add just a little bit of olive oil to your pan, and you're going to add in your onion, a little bit of salt, and a little bit of pepper, and you're going to cook these down until they're tender, about 5 minutes or so. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we will move on to the next step. Alright, these have been cooking for about 5 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and add in my garlic. And I'm going to let this cook for about 30 seconds. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and add in my red wine. I'm going to let this cook for about a minute or so, just to let that alcohol cook off, because I want the flavor of the wine, not necessarily the alcohol in the wine. I love to cook with red wine or wine in general because it just adds a depth of flavor that you can't really get with a beef broth or a chicken broth. But you don't necessarily have to cook with it if that's something that you don't want to do. You can certainly add in beef broth or chicken broth. Okay, so that has reduced down quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add in all of my spices and let that cook for about 10 to 15 seconds, maybe a little bit longer, just until you smell all of those spices. It's going to toast them up and release all of their oils, and it's going to make this nice and flavorful. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in my crushed tomatoes. This is 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes, or you can do 2 small cans. Now I'm just going to let this come up to a boil and turn the heat down to a low. I'm going to let it simmer for about 5 minutes just to incorporate those spices into the sauce, and then we will add in our meatballs. Alright, so this has been cooking for about 5 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and set in all of my meatballs into the sauce. Now, when you get all these in here, you want to pretty much leave them alone and let them cook in the sauce, because if you go messing with it and stirring it around, you're going to break up the meatballs, and we want to keep them intact. So I've got a little spoon here. I'm just going to add some of this sauce on the top of the meatballs as gently as I can, and then we're going to put the lid on. And we're going to let this cook for about 20 to 30 minutes, just until all of the meatballs are cooked completely through. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up, and then I will show you what it looks like when it's done. In the meantime, I'm going to make some rice to go along with this. So I'm going to finish this up, and I'll meet you back here in just a second. Okay, so this cooked for about 20 minutes with the lid on, and then I just took the lid off and just let it cook for about 10 minutes just to thicken up that sauce a little bit. And I'm just covering up some of these meatballs with some of this tomato sauce, and this is pretty much good to go. Now you can serve this however you want. I'm going to serve it with some rice and some Israeli salad on the side. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off, and I'll make my plate, and then I will show you my plate. Here is my plate. I just have the meatballs and tomato sauce here. I just topped it with a little bit of feta cheese. I have a side of rice, Israeli salad, and I have some leftover bread that I just heated up over the stove in a skillet with a little bit of olive oil and some za'atar seasoning, and it was so good. But this is what we had for dinner tonight. Today I'm making cholent. It is a beef stew style meal. Typically it is cooked for about 15 to 20 hours, and they have it on Shabbat. We're not going to be cooking it that long. We're going to cook it about 2.5 to 3 hours, just until that meat is nice and tender. But if you want to cook this for the 15 to 20 hours, you can put this in a crock pot and put it on before you go to bed, so that way it'll be ready before dinner. So what I've got going on here is I've got 3 styles of beans. I've got I got chickpeas, pintos, and llamas. This is mostly what I've seen in all of the recipes that I researched was this style. Some used chickpeas and pintos, some used chickpeas and llama beans. It just depends on what you like. And I've got some pearled barley here, and that is what that looks like. I've got some water. I've got some potatoes that I just cut into large chunks. I just got it sitting in water just to keep it from getting brown. Salt and pepper. I've got some onion here, some eggs. Now you can do 4 eggs, you can do 6 eggs, you can do 8 eggs. However many that you prefer, use that amount. And I've got a roast here that I just cut into about 2-inch cubes. So I've got that there. It's just under some plastic wrap so it'll stay nice and fresh. And for spices, I've got some cumin, caraway, parsley, and some turmeric. So I'm going to get you guys set up and we will get this started. Okay, so I've got a large Dutch oven here and it's coming up to temperature. I've got it on medium-low heat and it's kind of hot. I'm going to go ahead and add in some olive oil to my pan, or my Dutch oven here. And I've got my meat sitting here to the side, and I've already seasoned it on both sides with some salt and pepper. Now I'm going to go ahead and sear this on both sides until it is nice and golden. And then I'm going to remove it to a plate, and then we will move on to the second batch, because I don't want to crowd the pan. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then I'll meet you back here, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, so these are nice and seared on each side, and I'm just going to set them on a plate here so they can just rest and hang out while we cook our onions. There is not much oil left in the pan, so I'm just going to add probably about a tablespoon more oil, and I'm going to add in my onion, a little bit of salt, and a little bit of pepper, and I'm going to cook these onions down until they get tender. And then we will add everything else. This should take about 5 minutes or so. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back and add the rest of the ingredients. Alright, so the onions have been cooking for about 5 minutes. They're nice and tender. I'm going to go ahead and add in all of my spices just so I can get them toasted up and they release their flavor. And you want to toast them up for about 20-30 seconds, just until you start to smell the spices. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and add in my water. And give that a little mix. Make sure you get all of those little bits off the bottom. Okay. And add in the meat with all of the juices. I've drained my potatoes. I'm going to go ahead and add those all in. Now I'm going to add in all of my beans, my chickpeas, my pintos, my llamas, and my barley. I'm going to add all of those in. And I'm going to make sure this is well combined so that all of the beans are under the water. Now I'm going to place in my eggs. Now I want to just kind of nestle these in. You can move them around a bit once you get them in there with the spoon. But be very gentle because you don't want to crack the eggs. You want them to kind of stew in with all of these ingredients. So I've got that in there. I'm going to turn my heat up to about medium, and I'm going to let this come up to a boil. And then once this comes up to a boil, I'm going to add the lid, turn the heat down to low, and we're going to let this simmer for about 2.5 to 3 hours until the potatoes are tender and the meat just falls apart. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will meet you back here and I will show you what it looks like when it's done, and then we'll take the potatoes, we will take the eggs out and peel them put them back in here and dinner will be ready. So see you in just a second. Okay, so this has been cooking for about 2 hours. You want to come in and check it every once in a while just to make sure that the water level is good. If you need more water, you can add some more water. So what I did was I just took the eggs out, run them under cold water until they were cool, and then I just peeled them. And now I'm just going to add them back into the pot carefully. I don't want to break them up. I want to keep them whole. Now I'm just adding 4 eggs, but you can add more if you want. Typically you would add about 6 to 8 eggs, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm just doing the 4 eggs. So this has got about 30 more minutes to go. I'm going to cover this back up and let it cook for another 30 minutes. And then check the seasoning, make sure it's good, and then dinner will be done. Alright guys, here is my bowl. I've just got the beef stew here. I've got some bread over to the side that I'm going to dunk into this delicious stew. This looks and smells absolutely delicious. I can't wait to dig in. But you guys stay tuned for next week's meal plan. This week's meal plan, I'm going to be making some springtime family favorites. We're going to be starting out with panzanella salad with grilled chicken and a peach cobbler for dessert. This is one of my all-time favorite springtime dinners. Tuesday, we're going to have breakfast for dinner. We're going to have hash brown casserole, eggs, and bacon. Then we're going to have wheat berry salad with lemon vinaigrette. Thursday, we're going to have a very delicious barbecue baby back rib sandwiches with roasted broccoli slaw and some fries. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment in the comment section down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.